Okay, I'm just going to give it a few minutes as everybody starts coming in from the waiting room. I love this. Everyone's super prompt. It's 7 o'clock. A few more coming in. Okay. It looks like the number's slowing down. So I think in the interests of everyone's time, we're going to get going. And I wanted to first just say, hi, everyone. My name is Emma Gibbons, and I'm the CEO of Volleyball BC. And it is my absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight. We all know that the start of club season, and in particular the tryouts part of the club season, is extremely stressful. And so, as part of our commitment to try and acknowledge that volleyball isn't just about the physical, it's about the mental and it's about the well-being of all the participants, we are delighted to be here tonight to have a conversation with some of our mental health ambassadors about how best to manage anxiety around tryouts. And I'm hoping that everybody that comes tonight gets some tips and some tricks and some reassurance that you're not alone in going through this whole process. So I would like to start by first acknowledging that I'm coming here today and speaking to you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish Nation, and the Musqueam. And although Volleyball BC is played across this province, and we really benefit from being on the beautiful lands and are very privileged to both play and work here. So a couple of housekeeping before we get going as well is that this session is being recorded, and so you will get a link to this afterwards. It's going to be a very conversational style of discussion, and I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who submitted questions in advance, because I took the questions and I have shared them with the ambassadors that are here with us tonight, and we're going to shape the session around it. So that doesn't mean that we're not open to questions as we go along. Please post in the chat any questions that you have, and we will endeavor to answer them as we go along. So on to the next slide. Okay, so a little bit of the facts around tryouts, and these are the dates that I know are on a lot of people's minds right now. We've got tryouts coming up for different age groups at the dates that you can see on the screen. So the 12 and 13U are from November the 15th to the November the 25th. We've got 14U from November the 17th to November the 25th. And then we've got 15U from November the 24th to December the 2nd, and 16 to 18U for December the 1st to December the 9th. Now, a number of you asked some very practical and good questions about how tryouts work in terms of how many clubs can I go and attend, and what happens if there's a conflict in the tryout window, and what should I expect in terms of what coaches are looking for. All of those practical considerations are actually going to be addressed in a webinar that's taking place tomorrow night called So You Want to Play Club Volleyball. And our technical director and our head of programs and pathways will be on there to answer all the practical questions about what you can expect around club volleyball as a whole. So that is something that I'd encourage everyone to try and sign up for. And I will cut and paste those links into the chat at some point. And I'd also encourage you to read and download our guide to club volleyball if you haven't already. It's something that we did new this year for parents and players, and we wanted to create a resource that people could look into and read in terms of what to expect, what you should know before you accept an offer, all of those kind of things. So again, I'll post a link in the chat because both of those are going to be very useful resources for all your practical questions. So our focus here tonight, though, is on the mental side of preparation and how to manage the anxiety and what to do in terms of self-care around the tryouts. So as I mentioned earlier, thank you so much for your questions that you asked. They were all very useful, and we have shaped our conversation around the themes that you raised. So I'm going to start off talking about preparation for tryouts. We're then going to talk about how to deal with anxiety and stress during tryouts. And then we're going to have a session of questions around like what to do after tryouts and coping with the outcome. And then we'll also hopefully have some time, and we'll be happy to take questions about people who play a support role, because there's a lot of people that are on the call tonight who are parents or coaches, and we can maybe chat about how they can play useful roles as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panel who are here today. And in fact, I'm actually going to make them introduce themselves. But I am very excited to have them here. We launched about a year ago now a mental health ambassador program. And that we have these 4 individuals who put their hands up to be a resource and to share their experiences with our volleyball community about the mental side of playing. And so I'm very excited to have Shanice, Kyla, Derek, and Akash here with us today. And I'm going to ask them one by one to just introduce themselves to you with a quick question that's about to ask them to give you a brief overview of their role in volleyball and their most memorable experience at a tryout. So, without putting any of you on the spot, does anyone want to start with that? Or would you rather I put you on the spot? Okay, I'm going
I
to pick
guess
someone.
I can
Okay,
start.
Kyla,
Oh,
go for it.
well, who are you going to pick?
I was going to pick you, so you just
No,
keep
you
going.
Oh, okay. My name is Kyla Richey. Where should I start, Emma? You want a full synopsis? I played
Yes, I was going to say a very quick
UBC.
2-minute overview, especially
Perfect.
around the tryout piece.
I played at UBC for 5 years with Chenise, actually, so that was lovely. We were very fortunate to win 5 national championships when I was there. And then I played on the national team for 1,000,001 years and professional volleyball in 9 different countries. You will hear children in the background. That is my current life status. And to answer your tryout question, I was thinking about this the other day. I think my most memorable, well, I have 2, but I'll just say one for time, was when we were doing Team BC ID camp. I was a very shy person growing up, and I just decided one tryout. Yeah, there's yelling. I decided one tryout that I was just going to be outside of myself. I was going to be the person that volunteered. I was going to be the person that introduced myself to other players, that changed my partners. And from like, it was just a decision that I made. And it was just really pivotal, I think, in my growth as a player and a person. It was so scary, but very memorable when I look back.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that was like a developmental experience in itself, let alone the outcome.
Yes,
Awesome. Thanks,
exactly.
Kyla. Okay, what about Akash?
Hi everyone. My name is Akash. I played volleyball for UBC for this is my 5th year now, and I've played beach volleyball for Team Canada for 3 years. I'd say my most memorable moment at a tryout was my first time trying out for beach volleyball for Team Canada. And I did not know we had to do a yo-yo test, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a cardio test where you run back and forth for as long as you possibly can until you die. And that was very memorable because I was terrified, and it was definitely a moment of reflection on, okay, this is a lot more than I thought, but it worked out well. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. How about you, Derek?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, so I played at Trinity Western. I guess before that, I played Fraser Valley Volleyball Club for the club experience here, and then prior to that was at Focus. So I moved around a little, and then yeah, I played for 5 years at Trinity Western. Was fortunate enough to win a couple national championships there, and played a little bit with the junior national team, and then yeah, that was kind of the end of my volleyball experience at that point. Would be a good question there later. I can talk about with my experience with that. But my most memorable tryout memory. The one that instantly kind of came to mind was just it's more of like looking back now, but I think it was like a U17 Team BC thing where there was like a co-ed thing going on. And I remember having like one of the girls over there like really catching my eye. And it wasn't until about 4 years later that she ended up being my girlfriend and then ended up being my wife. And now we're together for 13 years. So who
Wow.
knows? You may just meet your future partner at a tryout. Who knows?
Cute, Derek. I didn't know that.
You
Yeah,
may
we
get
didn't interact with each other, but we did. She caught my eye even back then. So
wow. So you may get more than a spot on a volleyball team. That's
who
what you're
knows?
saying.
I can't promise anything, but
Okay.
that was my
Okay.
experience.
Awesome. Thank you. And then last but not least, Shanice.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Chenise. I am currently the head coach at Queen's University, all the way in Kingston, Ontario. So it is much past my bedtime, but happy to be here. I played both for our indoor and our beach national programs for a number of years. Before that, I was at UBC with Miss Kyla Richey. And then club volleyball wise, I played for the Victoria Titans on Vancouver Island. So that's kind of been my trajectory. And my most memorable tryout moment would probably be the first time I tried out for the indoor national team. I remember being incredibly nervous, incredibly scared for the 3-day tryout, but it was such a cool experience playing with a lot of people that I looked up to. And just a wonderful opportunity to, do my best. And luckily I made the team. So yeah.
That's awesome. I feel like there's a common theme here that fits in well with the webinar, which is about feeling anxious and nervous and unsure about what the whole experience is like. So let's head straight into the preparation phase, which is what most of the people on the call are really thinking about now, is how best to prepare for tryouts. So maybe I'll kick it straight back to you, Shanice, and reverse my order and say, like, how did you prepare for a tryout? So were there things that you did mentally or physically that got you in the right headspace?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's a little bit difficult for me to answer now because my tryouts in my later stages in life were more high performance based, were more national team based. But if I'm thinking about the, people that we're speaking to tonight, I think the best way to prepare for tryouts is to really try to get yourself in a place where you are comfortable. So maybe for those like 12 and 13U athletes who are trying out for the first time, making sure that you're comfortable showing up as you are in your first or maybe your second tryout. Challenge yourself to maybe use your voice a little bit more while you are there. I think there's nothing that you need to do beyond being yourself. And some of the things that like coaches are probably looking for at that age are your effort, your attitude, your energy. So really just trying to, show up authentically as you are and be okay with like giving your best, whatever that looks like. I think, tryouts can be this bigger thing than it needs to be, but how can you show up really authentically with what you have, the tools that you have in the age and stage that you are in?
That's awesome. Thank you. And how about you, Derek? Do you have any thoughts on how you prepared?
Yeah, I think similar to Shanice, it's harder for me I mean, it's been a minute too since I've been there, so I'm trying to remember what that was like. But I think I do remember feeling, and similar to others, very anxious about going to a tryout. I think it helped having some friends at those tryouts, so if you have that, fortunateness to know someone, sometimes going together, just like talking about it and just like getting excited about it. I think obviously there's an understandable level of nerves and anxiety that's going to come up, but I think there's also a certain level of excitement, and like it's a really cool opportunity to take all this work that you've been doing outside of this tryout as a chance to bring that forward. And so I think it's trying to focus on that instead of all the threats, looking at like the opportunities. I do think there's value in trying to focus in on like what are your strengths, what are the things that you bring, rather than trying to overcompensate for things that you're not like good. I mean, I'm thinking a little bit ahead of like once you're at the tryout, but I do think that sometimes similar to in games, we can try to like reinvent the wheel the moment we like show up. And so I think it's helpful to hone in on what do you know, what do you do, and just go out in there and play and trying to make that the primary focus. Because usually when we show up with that, and that's more for me, I guess I'm thinking too, is that when I can just focus on having fun and going to play and doing what I already have put in lots of time to do, and then trusting in that, it does give me a lot more footing rather than focusing all the things I lack and then all the things I'm missing, because that is endless. You know, that's an endless list of things I'm missing, but and I'll never really reach it. So it's kind of futile to grasp onto that, I find.
Yeah, that's helpful. So focusing on the things that can bring you strength, I guess, in
Yeah.
that process.
Yeah, and even the things you can control too.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty. How about you, Akash? Do you have any tips or ideas about how you prepared for tryouts?
Yeah, of course. So I'd say there's a difference between smart training and overtraining. Everyone's body's different. There's a different amount of load everyone can handle before a tryout, and understanding that and acknowledging that before the days or the weeks before the tryout is really important. So remembering that training for a tryout doesn't happen overnight. You have to trust the work you've done, the process, what you've put in before that day, because a tryout is really just your chance to showcase what you have worked on, not necessarily building all up to it the night before. So some of the things you can control, nutrition, for example, are you eating healthy? Are you giving your body everything it needs? Sleep is very important. It affects you the night before, so maybe making a routine so that you know what you're going to follow the night before. Stretching, very important, rolling out, anything like that. And then mental preparation, of course, too. Maybe watching videos of you playing before so that you're super excited, knowing what you can bring, highlight videos, and then visualizing what you have to offer is really helpful as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to flip the question a bit for you, Kyla, and say, like, it sort of builds on what Akash was just saying about the whole practice piece. And so what was your experience of practicing? Like, it can cause anxiety for some people, and we definitely had some questions about, I feel anxious every time I think about trying out, and what can I do? Like, is practicing making me more anxious, or is it making me better? Should I keep practicing or not? Like, what are your thoughts about that link between, I guess, the physical and then the mental piece?
Yeah, I can actually like relate that even to sometimes our like pre-game going into an important game, university or pro or Team Canada. So it's really similar in the fact that your preparation and your maybe practice before the games that we would have, sometimes you're just not feeling your best. And lots of the time, and what all of you will have to kind of figure out as you go through these tryouts and you go through these experiences is if you're a player that needs those reps to feel confident, or if you're a player that just needs to rest. And as Akash was saying, like take that visualization, the mental training, the breathing, and just trust that you've done the preparation. It's not going to change anything at the tryout or for me, like at the game. But I was a player that really liked getting reps, just passing reps. I just wanted 150 passing reps. They didn't have to be hard. That's just what I wanted in order to get into the groove. So it really depends on the person. If you're anxious when you're practicing before the tryout, then you maybe know that that's not going to be good for you. But if maybe like peppering with a friend or doing a little practice beforehand, if that gets you excited and that gets you kind of warmed up, then that can be something that can be a positive experience. So I would just say, like, again, if this is kind of your first, second, or third tryout, just knowing that you're also trying to work through these things and you're trying to figure out what works for you. So you can also keep that moving forward. But the biggest component, as Akash said, is just knowing the work that you've put in beforehand, and just trusting that that will be enough.
Yeah, yeah. And that can be really hard to do sometimes, can't it? Because you feel like you start questioning yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm sure we'll get into that later in another round.
Yes, I'm sure we will. Shanice, your thoughts on the same thing? Like, was it helpful to you to practice? Not helpful? Like, how did you handle that side of things?
Yeah, I think this is such a personal question, and we, the four of us, I think have, the beauty of age and experience that we know ourselves pretty good at this age and stage, where when we're younger, we're trying to figure those things out. But I think kind of two different things. The first, I would say for me, nerves were normal and have continued to be normal my entire career. And even now, stepping into coaching, like I'm very nervous before every single match. And that was true for me as a player, being very nervous. But I got to this place where I could, um, relate those nerves to the importance that things had for me. So to me, nerves are a good thing. It's a matter of like what I'm doing is important to me, and it's just a matter of honing in on that. And a really easy way that I learned how to control that was through my breathing. And I try to do that for my athletes now as a coach. Like we as a collective take one deep group breath before we start training. And I just found it just such a uh what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like a humbling experience being able to like breathe in, breathe out, and then it's like, okay, these nerves are fine. These are a good thing. I'm gonna make my way through. So I think it's not necessarily about a lot of reps beforehand or less reps. It's about figuring out what works for you and also being okay with having some nerves. It means it's important and it's a good thing. It's just a matter of learning how to control those nerves.
Yeah, that's a really nice transition actually into something that I'm going to ask Derek, actually put you on the spot, but you've already mentioned a little bit there, Shanice, and you, Akash, about the whole sort of self-care piece in the preparation up to tryouts. And, it can really play havoc with people's sleep, with feeling too nervous to eat beforehand, all of those things that like people might then get even more worried because they're not feeling great, and so they're thinking, oh, how am I going to play my best if I'm not feeling great? Like, what were some of the things that you found in terms of that self-care, or like the tips for like how you could manage that side of things of preparation?
Um, yeah, I think for me, I wouldn't say I struggled as much with, again, this is where everybody's going to have their own flavor of this too, where around stress, how does that manifest itself? And for some people, it's I can't eat. For some people, it's I can't sleep. I would say I was more in the category of struggling with sleep. And so I think that all of those, looking back now and kind of with my knowledge now and understanding of even just like the human body and what's going on there, like it's a stress response. When you're stressed, you can't eat. Your body doesn't want to do its like normal functions because it feels like there's a threat. It feels like there's something going on in your environment. This is why we feel so worried about something that is in the future, and it's all kind of spinning its wheels in some sense. And so I think finding ways, and this is where I've kind of tried to do for myself more lately, when I am feeling more anxious and maybe I am struggling with sleep a little bit more, it's just like sometimes it's as simple as finding a place for those thoughts to land. So whether it's like sharing with somebody what I'm feeling, just even talking it through with someone, because sometimes stuff that's rattling around in my brain doesn't actually make any sense. And it's not until I verbalize it that I'm like, oh, right, that's a little silly. Or, that, okay, yeah, I know that's a little bit, but this I need to work on. And even when you're on my own, sometimes it's a journaling practice. I kind of like to think of it as like a journaling in a way that's almost like deliberate worry, where you're like actually setting aside time to worry in a way that's like functional. Because it's like I'm worrying for, kind of what Shanice was saying is like the nerves are there because it's important. And maybe they're pointing me in the direction of some things I need to prepare for. But if it just stays in my head, it kind of just rattles around like a bunch of noise. And so I think finding ways to just slow that down, externalize it a little bit by putting it on paper. Even like if I'm struggling sleeping, I'll just like do like a brain dump where I just take everything and put it all in there paper. And then if it's important, I'll come back to in the morning. So again, anything that just allows some of that to just get out of here, and pairing that with like breathing, ways to kind of just regulate the body a little bit. those are some of the stuff that come to my mind. I wish I knew these when I was a little younger.
Which
But
is why we're doing these
this
sessions.
is why we're here, right? Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. How about you, Akash? You already talked a little bit about that side of preparation, but have you got any other things that have worked for you?
Yeah, for sure. As Derek and Shanice had mentioned, deep breathing is so helpful. Even if you don't think it in the moment, if you just spend a moment and just take that time to breathe and only focus on one thing that you're looking at, or even close your eyes, it can really help center yourself. Positive self-talk, that's another thing that it seems easy to do, but it's not. Saying things to yourself like, I can do this, I got this, I am ready. It's easy to think it, but when we actually say it to ourselves, it becomes more of an actionable item, and it's easier for us to apply that in the setting when we're nervous. And then focusing on the process, not the outcome in the tryout, even though, as I said, for everything else, it's harder said than done, or done than said, but cues such as passing, focusing on the things that I can control rather than I got to pass a 3. It's just, okay, I'm going to have an early platform that I can control. I can't control that I'm going to pass a 3. And then, yeah, preparing a routine that makes you feel comfortable and that you're ready to go also really helps.
Thank you. Does anyone, I'm not going to direct this at anyone in particular, but did any of you have any kind of like little rituals or things that you did? You know how sometimes people have things that they just do to kind of mentally get themselves in the game. And that could be, I mean, I'm sure it's also about like preparation for playing in games too, but in tryout situations would be the same. Did anyone have anything that they did that was kind of quirky but worked for them?
I could share mine. It's not very quirky, but I know at nationals last year, I was really nervous because the gym was so packed and everyone was cheering and drums are banging and everything. So I really focused on, I would look up and be like, okay, I'm just going to count the lights at some points when I was waiting for the person behind me to serve. I would just look up and I'd count the lights because it helped distract me a little bit. So I didn't see everything going on, and it helped me reset in the moment. So that was one thing. And then also, breathing, doing the 3-2-1 breathing exercise when I was getting like, oh, like I made a mistake, I need to focus. I would use that so that I didn't feel like I had so much weight on my shoulders and I had to perform.
Yeah. That's really cool. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And actually, you have just transitioned us amazingly well into the next section, which is talking about during the tryouts. So actually, I guess I'm going to go to Shanice first for this one as well. Like, it kind of touches on what literally Akash just said about tuning out the noise and the distractions, and how that can seem really overwhelming in the moment, especially when there's a lot of people, might be your first time at the tryouts, there's a lot of noise. How were there tips or ideas or ways that you've helped tune that out so you could focus just on yourself and how you performed?
Yeah, tough question. I think some of it's kind of already been alluded to a little bit, but the big thing for me would just be to control what you can control. Like, I think it's very easy as young women to like show up to a tryout and be like, oh, so and so is here, or like, oh, look at that girl, she's doing really well in this skill, or like, I'm not good enough. And those thoughts may be true, they may be untrue, but they are thoughts like in our head. And I think the only thing that you can do as an individual is like really focus on what you can do. What are your touches looking like? Whenever you're playing the ball, are you calling mine? Are you making the effort to go and touch the ball? Just doing little things like that rather than focusing on what everyone else is doing, because there are going to be some good people at tryouts. There are going to be, lots of talented individuals in the gym, and those are good things. But if we only focus on those things, then we take away from ourselves. So just, I would just reiterate to control what you can, and that's your own touches and your effort and your energy and how you're speaking to one another, how you're speaking with coaches and things like that.
Yeah, that's some great tips. How about you, Kyla? Like same question, like what was some of the ways that you were able to tune out noise and distractions in those kind of very hectic environments?
Yeah, Shanice, everything you just said about like, oh, she's here and oh, she's doing so well. I'm like, oh, we're back at a tryout. It's like exactly what everyone says. And you just, yeah, it's just so easy to get wrapped up in that and like feel super anxious about like where you sorry for the noise, where you fit into that. And like, you know, I've been that person in a tryout too, that I was like, okay, these people for sure made the team, and like there's these spots left, and it's just, it doesn't help at all. And the noise and the distractions, I think everyone said such really good pieces of advice. Like, I'm not a good breather, as Akash was saying, like the 3-2-1 or the different structured breaths, but I'm like a big inhale, exhale breather, just to like get it in and get it out and then refocus. I've used that a lot for years, and I think the positive self-talk in tryouts is so important, because of course you're going to be nervous. I was nervous for the last tryout that I had, and the positive self-talk is, I think, going to help you bounce back from maybe not a great action, but you're going to make mistakes in tryouts. Coaches know that. Coaches know that volleyball is going to be, you know, a win-loss, and making lots of mistakes in that, but it's going to be how you bounce back, how you react, how you're, you know, engaging with your teammates around you. I think that's super important. So I think really focusing on that, letting that go and moving on to the next one is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Derek, how about you? Like, how did you kind of tune out those distractions too?
I would say, yeah, this was probably where I struggled more than anything as an athlete, was around sometimes the noise and all of those things going on. And I think where I got tripped up in some sense, looking back on it now, is I tried so hard to spend all my energy on ignoring things. And in doing so, I took my energy away from what was in front of me, which was the thing I could actually be controlling and focusing on. And so, I mean, this is where, whether it was in tryouts or in competition, in big games, a lot of my effort, again, my mental energy was like spent on, don't think about this, don't think about that. And it's kind of like you're playing a game of like whack-a-mole with your thoughts. And it's just like, it takes up so much mental energy to actually do that, that I wasn't paying attention to the next play, the next opportunity to work on something. And so I think that in some sense that the effort of trying to tune things out takes you away from tuning in to what's in front of you. And that's like, I think where I think people could benefit more from, is spending less energy on what they don't want to do and more energy. I think it's a similar theme everyone's kind of sharing here, of like focusing on what helps, what works, the positive, what's controllable. Because again, there's always going to be noise. And so to tune it out is almost impossible. It's like, okay, unplug, plug your ears. I guess is the best I can offer for people. Put earplugs in if you really want to tune it out. But if you want to, work with it and kind of roll with it, it's learning to kind of let it come and go in some sense. And I guess the piece I would add to that is noticing when you're getting pulled into the noise. And if you can catch that, then it's like bringing yourself back. It's kind of like a whole mindfulness piece of, oh, I'm
Like,
drifting off
ground
to these
yourself.
things.
Yeah.
And then using a breath, using something, your feet on the ground, using that. For some people, it's like the antenna, or it's like the center line, or their shoes, just something that you can kind of like come back to that centers you a little bit. And in a way, you're kind of strengthening that attention muscle, you could say.
Yeah. I want to build a bit on what you said, Derek, and maybe I'll flip this one to Kyla to start. But you've kind of mentioned this, Derek, in what you just said about how actually the nerves, you can channel them in a positive way. We had quite a few questions about that, about like, is there a way that you can take your nerves and make it a positive part of the experience and not let it detract as much? So, Kyla, do you have any thoughts around that, and how maybe you took nerves or energy, or I don't know, people call it nervous energy or whatever that looks like, and you channeled it in a positive way in that kind of environment?
Yeah, someone told me at some point in my career that there's like, you're feeling butterflies you know, is also the same feeling as excitement in your tummy. And that like just changed my whole outlook on nerves after that, is that, and as Shanice had said too, like it's a good thing you care. If you weren't nervous, then that would be a little strange. So if you feel those nerves, that's totally normal. And knowing that every single person that's at tryouts in the gym has the exact same feelings. Some of the coaches might be nervous. Your parents are certainly nervous. So everyone's feeling the nerves. And again, it's just that feeling of like, I'm nervous, and then just flipping that idea around that to say I'm excited, and I'm excited at the prospect of making this team. I'm excited about what I can show during this tryout. So for me, it was really that kind of mindset shift when I learned that. So I just was telling, if I told myself that, you know, the butterflies in my stomach are excitement, not so much like negative nerves, then that really helped me moving forward. And then also when I was at UBC in my first or second year, the fake it till you make it phrase was just always running in my brain. Again, like there's older players or there's more skilled players or whoever's in the gym. I think it's really easy to kind of, you know, get again down that rabbit hole, but putting yourself out there, being loud, grabbing someone that you've, you know, never met to be partners with. I think for me, again, as a shy individual growing up, it was just fake it till you make it. Like pretend you're an outgoing person, pretend you feel confident during this, and then it actually does come after a while.
So
yeah.
you felt like that kind of then like almost manifested itself then, because you could transition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. How about you, Akash? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, Kyla made some really great points there. I think the one that resonated with me most was that you're feeling that way because you care. And it might be a lot in the moment, but if you care, it means that like there's a reason you're there, and cognitively restructuring the experience to possibly, instead of being, oh, this is scary, I'm feeling this way, into I get to feel this way. It's a privilege for me to feel this way because it means I'm challenging myself. I'm outside of my comfort zone, which means that I'm growing in some way, regardless of the outcome. And that's a really strong feeling that is going to make you better tomorrow rather than someone else who isn't throwing themselves out there. So thinking in that way has kind of helped me through those kind of nerves. And then once again, it always comes back to the breathing, on focusing on your breath, bringing yourself back to that present moment, and what you see, what you hear, and turning outward rather than inward is really helpful to, you know, control those nerves and understand why you're feeling the way you are, and that it's actually a really exciting thing that can take you a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And how about you, Shanice? You mentioned that this has been something that's been a bit of a lifelong journey for you. So has there been ways that you're able to take your nerves or your anxiety in these kind of moments and then really channel it in a positive way?
Yeah, I think I would just reiterate what both Kyla and Akash just said. Those are two really beautiful, perfectly wrapped up answers. So I wouldn't really add too much more, but I think just that like reframing of nerves are important. And I think the other aspect of it too, which Kyla kind of touched on, was that everybody's feeling that way. And it's okay to like verbalize that, whether that's to yourself, whether that's to your parents, maybe to the coaches that are running the tryout, like, hey, I'm actually I'm really nervous. Everyone else probably is too. And if you can get those things out rather than keeping it into yourself, it's only going to ease your experience. It's only going to allow you to be like, oh, this is normal. This is a normal reaction to something like this. This is a normal experience for a lot of people, rather than I'm having this singular negative anxious experience trying to conquer this thing. It's like everyone's actually in this together, and that's okay too.
Yeah, it's like reminding yourself these are universal feelings. They're not very specific to you, which
Yeah.
is good. I'd like to touch on some of the stuff that actually, Kyla, you mentioned this, so maybe I'll go to you first, but we had a few questions there about people who are a quieter or a shyer person and how they will feeling that they might not stand out, quote unquote, or they might not be as visible in those kind of evaluating situations, and how might they sort of use their shyer side to kind of channel that into a positive, or how do they demonstrate their commitment and drive without necessarily being the loudest person on court? I mean, you mentioned that actually one of your techniques is to kind of fake it till you make it and project that side of things, but did you also find that there were times when it didn't necessarily matter?
Yeah, the fake it till you make it came later. Even before that, so shy that you couldn't even, project your voice a little bit or put yourself out there. In my younger years, because I wasn't the loudest and, the most confident, I actually would wear like the brightest colored t-shirt that I could possibly find at tryouts. That was, I think, one of my dad's crazy ideas, because then at least I'm physically standing out.
That's a
So,
great
and
idea, actually.
although then a few years like would pass, and then everyone was wearing like bright colored t-shirts. So then it worked actually to go muted. But anyways, yes, you could do that. Put something in your hair, bright colored shoelaces. But I think the biggest thing, that coaches are looking for is, if you're a team player and how you're making your teammates around you better, how you're going for balls, how you're like, again, that bounce back after. I think it's, again, like I've seen so many different players through my career, and sometimes the best player, if they're not coachable, they're not making the team. So I've been on the coaching side too, where, you have to make tough choices, but if someone's coachable and if someone has the willingness to learn, that is way more attractive for a coach who's picking their team to bring that person onto than, someone that isn't coachable but already has that skill. So that's something to keep in mind as you're, going through your tryouts is, yeah, you don't have to be the loudest, but making sure that you're working super hard. You can be the hardest worker in the gym, even though, you're not the loudest. And Chenise can also talk to that, because she was also that person, not super vocal, but would always be working her buns off in, every practice. And coaches really want that.
Yeah. I will flip that to you, Shanice, because to answer too, because it sounds like you are very similar, but also because you're now in a coaching role. So would you kind of agree with that, what Kyla has said on that front?
Yeah, I think it took a lot of time and experience for me to develop a voice. I will say that when I started playing volleyball, I was very quiet. I did not cheer very loud. I wasn't one to be this bigger, larger voice. It took a lot of time for me to find that. But I think what worked for me was like focusing on individual skills and trying to execute those really well. Or like, did I need to be the loudest person in the gym? No. Did I need to call the ball if it was coming to me? Yes. And so just making sure that I was using my voice in small ways to control my part of the game. But I just think from the coaching aspect, Kyla is definitely right. I think there are a lot of intangibles that coaches are looking for, especially at the club level. I think effort is kind of one of the non-negotiables. Coaches want people that are going to put in the effort, that are going to work hard, that are, going to go for every ball, going to make diving defensive plays and put in the effort to try and touch something. But there's also some other skills that they're looking for too. Are you the type of teammate that is celebrating your other teammates' accomplishments? Are you giving everyone high fives? Are you interacting and trying to have conversations on the court? Are you asking questions in training? Are you like engaged in the learning experience? I think skill is one thing, and coaches will always look for skill, but there's lots of other ways that you can stand out. And so just figuring out what works for you as an athlete and where you have space to grow and how you can show different areas of your game.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. Like it's definitely like looking at the whole piece of the puzzle and where you fit in that and trying to pigeonhole yourself necessarily into a character or a role that doesn't feel natural. I want to flip a bit, and Derek, I'm going to come to you with this. We had so many questions here about how to get over making a mistake in tryouts or that feeling like, oh, I messed that up and it didn't go well, and how you basically can channel that or address that so that it doesn't then spill over into the rest of your experience during the tryouts. So, do you have any tips or thoughts about how people can do that? Like any reflections from your experience of that time and just how you can reset mentally so that you stay positive in those scenarios?
Yeah, I would draw more from like current things I do, especially now in like working as like a counselor and the work I do there with people and athletes. But like, especially in those moments of making a mistake, it's like we just get bombarded with what have I done? I'm an idiot. I'm terrible. I'm this. All these like very critical thoughts that tend to just take over, and they're mixed in with the nerves and the fear of what it means. And like one of the simplest things I suppose you could do is to I call it like noticing the story, like naming the story. Like what's the story I'm telling myself? Because what's going on in my head is often, like I was saying earlier, and Shanice I think was saying too, it's like it's not the full picture, but it's kind of like what I'm really getting latched onto. And when it's like right here, it's really hard to like see anything else. And so sometimes it's naming the story of like I'm I'm never going to make this team. It's like that's the story, or I even think of it as like I'm having the thought that. And then a third one is something as simple as just like thanking your mind. It's like your mind has this like tendency to want to like jabber away and like tell you a bunch of things. And even in that, I do this too sometimes where like I'll give my mind a name. So like my mind's chattiness, it's named Terry. And so like when Terry gets going, Terry just tells me the worst that like Terry's got all my darkest secrets and all these things. And sometimes Terry just wants to, you know, go off. And so I think sometimes even just like turning to Terry and be like, okay, thanks, Terry, in my own head. You can do this out loud if you want, but people might, give you funny looks. But it's just like, again, it's like a lightness to it, like of like sometimes again, everything in our head, we take it so seriously. And I think some just times finding ways to do something as simple as naming your mind, thanking it can be really helpful. Just as like something more quick and accessible, I find.
Yeah. I love that. I might have to adopt Terry because he
Yeah.
sometimes lives in my head too.
Yeah, we've all got a Terry.
Akash, do you have any thoughts about the same thing, like how you shake it off in those situations where things haven't gone well?
Yeah, I thought Derek made some really great points there. I think I talked about this in our other webinar as well, but I like to use the simple technique of like when I notice I made a mistake or anything like that, I take a deep breath and then I tell myself after I take that breath, I say stop in my head. Like sometimes I say it out loud depending on the context of the situation. But then after I say that word, it's kind of like my reset word I say next, and then I say okay. And then I know, okay, that was in my head. That's what I was thinking. Stop, it's not that time. These thoughts aren't productive. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. And then that kind of helps me reset and know where I need to be in that moment rather than reminiscing on what had happened before. So that's helpful for me. And then another thing is seeing through my eyes, not through my head, because we have like our fight and our flight. So in a game, we need to fight. And if I'm thinking about everything else, then I'm obviously not going to be able to focus on hitting a ball or passing a ball. So seeing through my eyes is okay, I'm looking at the ball, I'm looking at who's in front of me, I'm looking at that server. That's what I'm focusing on now, not what's in my head on what happened in the back, what I had done before. And that really helps me focus and reset mentally for the next point.
That's so helpful. Thank you. I love that. Shanice, do you have anything to add? I also wanted to ask whether you do any or have you done any positive self-talk? We've talked a lot about that over the last few minutes. So if you've got any thoughts about positive self-talk as well, and how that helps in those situations?
Yeah, I'm lucky that I learned pretty early on that I had a good club coach my first couple of years, but he would never allow us to say sorry. That was like not allowed to be a part of our vocabulary, and it stuck with me ever since then. Where, a lot of times you'll see someone make a mistake and they'll go, "Oh, sorry, sorry, my bad, my bad," and that can be really damaging for some people. It can make them maybe spiral or be pretty negative. And so my coach, he taught me, if I were to make an error, it's not sorry, it's I'll do better next time, or I got the next one. It was putting some level of a positive spin on something, because everyone knows when you make a mistake, there's no need to like claim it. Everyone's able to see it, and I don't think claiming it in that way is actually helpful. But I think if you're able to like show that your intent is to do better the next time, is that your focus on the next one, it will almost like trick your brain into thinking forward rather than looking back. So that was one thing that just really helped me my entire career, was just not focusing on saying sorry, but trying to change good habits and be like, I got the next one.
I love that. Like that again, like reframing something so that it focuses on the more positive side of things. Kyla, do you have anything that about that side of things, like with the positive self-talk and how you can kind of reframe, like Shanice was mentioning?
Don't mind the squirmy worm in the corner here. Um, yeah, I think for me as well, like what Shanice said, it's so important. It was so important for me to focus on the next point so I could, again, not spiral. It's very easy to do at any level. And my thing was to make a connection or contact with one of my teammates. And if it's at tryouts, it can be the person right next to you. So for me, it was like a physical high five. Oh, no, no. It was a physical high five. I gave a lot of high fives, after a mistake, just because I just needed to get out of my body and like focus on the next thing. And I think, for any skill, whether it's serve, receive, or blocking, like a quick conversation with the person next to you as well. Like for passing, for example, like as Shani said, okay, I got the next one, or like, can you help with the shorter ball and I'll get the deeper one. Like just a little conversation that way really helped me. And then we're focused on the next point. So that's again what worked for me. The physical part of giving high fives also was kind of a reset for me as
Yeah.
well.
I love that because it's about like creating connection with other people and kind of using
So
them
you're
in a
not just
positive
left
way.
on your little island.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because as we've just already said, everyone goes through this. It's a very human emotion. So I'd like to transition now into after tryouts, which is also a nerve-wracking point for people as they're waiting to find out whether they made it or not. And I'm just going to open this one up to anyone who's wants to comment. But like, if you don't make a team, obviously that's extremely hard for everyone, and it's really, really challenging. So like, do any of you have any experiences around that you'd like to share? In terms of not being selected for something? It could be volleyball, it could be another context completely, and like how you like managed your way through that, I guess, and sort of helped yourself to see the bigger picture maybe, or to adjust how you were feeling.
I can share. Um, this was when I was on the junior national team, and I trained all summer and committed to the team. And then when it came to the World Junior Championships, I got cut and didn't make the travel roster. And I remember this being a very, very painful time for me, because I mean, I put so much effort in and felt like I built camaraderie with this team, and put in all this effort, and then to make it to the final weeks and then to not get to travel was very devastating for me. And I think, like, looking back on it, I was very emotional. I was sad. I was incredibly angry. I was afraid of what this meant for my future. And I think, like, I'm glad I had that experience in some sense of like feeling how I felt. And maybe that would be where I would encourage people if I think sometimes when we see somebody who like has something bad like this happen, we want to just like silver linings and, like, don't, yeah, there'll be another day. And I see the value in that, but I think it's also important for you to kind of feel I don't know, everything that's there. Like it makes sense that you're sad. It makes sense that you're angry. And so I think that's maybe why I wish I heard a little more from myself, because I think I wanted to like tamp it all down and pretend like didn't bother me. But it did. And I think similar to the stuff around nerves, you grieve and you feel sad for reasons because it's like it mattered to you. So I think there's a part of me that like would want to encourage people to like not hide how you feel necessarily, in the sense of like, oh, other people made it, I have to be happy and therefore I can't be sad. Like you can be both. You can be happy for them and you can be sad. And so I think it's just like giving room for both of those sides of it too. Because I know that was another question there as well, is like, what if other people make it?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think so thank you for sharing that. I think it's again making a really human connection. Like these are emotions that everyone feels, whether it's anxiety or it's grief because you lost something, you lost
Yeah.
the dream that you wanted to have. Does anyone else have anything that they want to share on that front? Or even as an extension? Oh, Shanice, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's hard. Everyone wants to make teams. Not everyone will, but I think there is always something to gain from the experience, whether you make it or not. Yes, do I think you need to like acknowledge your feelings for what they are and really feel them? Yes. But I also think if, you're on the end where you don't make the team that you tried out for, I think you can, again, it's this like reframing, but you can view it as like gifting yourself resilience for the future. So I don't unfortunately have a volleyball tryout where I didn't make it. I was very blessed and very lucky to make all the teams that I tried out for. But in the later years in my life, I've had experiences where, I applied for grad school 4 years ago and I didn't get accepted. And that to me at the time was like devastating. And I was like, I'm never doing this again. This is awful. Like I was crushed by it, of course, but it gifted me the resilience and it gave me time to, work on the things that I needed to work on. And then 4 years later, I applied again and I was selected for it. So I think there's a lot of times where you'll hear of athletes who, like I think Michael Jordan is an example, got cut from multiple teams until he finally made it. And I think, those deselections or those cuts gifted him the resilience to keep going. And there is always some life skill that you can gain from something. Does it hurt in the immediate? Yes, absolutely. But if you have the like will to keep going, years later, maybe the following year, I think it will pay off.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's getting that length of perspective, isn't it? That can be challenging in the moment. Moving on though, and Derek, you touched on this too, like how you can hold both of those emotions at the same time about, if somebody makes the team and you didn't. And we did have a few questions about that too, about, I'm worried that my friend might make the team and I won't, and I like it's going to be difficult to be happy if I don't, like, it's hard to feel that happiness for someone else. And I'm wondering if any of you have anything that you want to talk about in that sense. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in the context of making a team, not making it. You can have people who play roles on a team that you wanted to play. You didn't get to be in those positions. Anyone got anything that they want to add? I'm going to put you on the spot, Akash, and say, like, have you had those team dynamics before?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as you continue to progress, trying out for teams is a part of volleyball. Like you're gonna have that chance. And yes, you're trying out this year, but you're gonna have to try out again next year. It's just a continual process that everyone has to go through. So, and I guess when you have a friend that makes it and like you didn't necessarily make it, that can be really frustrating and that can be really disappointing. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's okay to feel that way. I know it doesn't make you a bad person that you're feeling that way, but processing that in the right way and giving yourself time to like feel those things is really important as well. But then also celebrating your friends' successes as well. Like just because right now they did something and you didn't doesn't mean that there's a reason for animosity. Like you are still a team. There are still ways to play together. And it helps you realize that volleyball is so much more than just a way to play a sport together, and you'll actually make lifelong friends. So maintaining those friendships over the sport is really important, and using your friend too to see, okay, how can I improve in the ways that, like, how can I improve myself, not necessarily in the way that my friend did that I didn't. That self-comparison can be really toxic. So focusing on your own game rather than other people's is really important too.
Yes, I love that. Like, again, it comes back to what you can control versus what you can't control. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about like the final section that we talked about at the beginning, which is the support during this whole process. And again, like maybe I'll go back to you, Akash, just to start off with and ask you like what roles did your parents or other people play in this whole process for you when you were trying out? And were there things that they did that were helpful, or there were things that they did that weren't helpful? What, do you have anything that you want to share on that front?
Yeah, I would say my parents have always been very involved in my sport journey. Even now, I'd say they still are because, it's more fun to do it together. But I'd say some of the tips I've have is that effort over outcome is very important. That's one of the things that my parents have always stressed to me. It doesn't matter if I score the most amount of goals or that was more soccer when I was younger, but or score points or anything like that. But did I put in that work? Did I prepare properly? Did I put in the best ability I could to be ready to perform was basically what I was taught is more important. The controllables, once again, coming back to that theme. And then the other thing, my parents, they taught me listening to my own emotions, acknowledging them, and like understanding that when it's appropriate, like to focus on that, and when it's important to focus on the game was an important part as well. And celebrating the little wins is really helpful too. For example, having the courage to go to a tryout. That is a really scary thing. And a lot of people want to be at those tryouts and they don't even make it to the tryouts because it's not easy. And there's a lot of anxiety and emotions that come with that. So celebrating little things like that. Also, like your sleep, your nutrition, the training you did just to feel ready to come to that tryout. All those little things are really important to acknowledge as successes as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. Kyla, how about you? Like, were there people that you drew upon or resources that you drew upon that you found helpful during these kind of processes?
My parents were also super involved. And Kash, your parents sound awesome. It's so great.
Yeah.
I think like, yeah, having that, whether it's a friend, whether it's a parent, teacher, coach, just having that outlet to, as everyone's talked about, just to be sad if you didn't make it or to maybe reflect on the tryout. I think again, like, I think it was Chenise that said there's always something to learn in the tryout. So even taking it back onto like how did I prepare for this tryout and did it work for me? Or okay, after this, like I was kind of unfocused during this time. So I was getting distracted by this person and I was comparing. Like you can take kind of those notes, knowing that for next time, again, there's going to be a tryout before you know it. And so learning from that, I think, is also really helpful. And even just going back, I think if you don't make one team, well, you'll find this out tomorrow, I guess, but there are other opportunities to play on other teams or to, refine some of those skills that maybe you need to work on. Some of the best players that I played with on Team Canada didn't make their school team until grade 12. Like there's just an abundance of stories that, again, it's not just you're making it all the time. There's different paths forward. And I think, again, just taking in all of the information that you can, learning about yourself in the process, and just to make it better for next time and be better prepared or a little bit more comfortable if you were, struggling with that, I think is also so important.
I love that, Kyla. And I feel like you've actually transitioned nicely into what I was going to ask you all to do, which is um, like a final word or tip that you think people can take away. And I think that your message that, is part of the process and you can take what you want from the whole experience is really powerful. Chenise, what would be something that you wanted to sort of anything that you feel like a last tip or point around support or anything else around the tryout process?
Maybe I'll phrase my last words for any parents on the call. I think, in the after tryout process, try not to analyze your child's play. Try not to, tell them what they did well or maybe what they didn't do so well or areas they could have been better. I'm sure there's already a million and one thoughts going through their head. I think the best thing that parents can do is listen and listen to understand, not listen to respond. Listen to all the feelings, thoughts, and emotions that are going through your head, and just be there as a form of support. And then to Kyla's point, just what are the other opportunities? Can you pick yourself back up and seek out something different? Is there house league available to you? Is there private training? Is there, beach volleyball in the summer that you can look forward to? I think there will always be something different out there. It doesn't have to be one linear, unique experience. There is definitely volleyball for life beyond just club volleyball if you happen to be one of those individuals that does not make a team.
Yeah, I 100% can attest to that working at Volleyball BC. There are many different programs and pathways available. That's really great. Thanks, Shanice. How about you, Derek? Any last thoughts about support or any other areas of trying out?
Yeah, I think I'm really glad Chenise mentioned that point for the parents on the call. Like, there's definitely, I know it's hard, but it's like it's not your tryout. This is an opportunity for your kid to really show what they've done and what they've trained, and so letting that be what will be, and then kind of being there to sort of walk alongside them on the edges of that as they step on and off the court or in between driving home. I think there's a real opportunity to build a connection there and like talk through it. But when it comes to the tryout itself, they got to be the one to do it. And so it's a cool, I don't know, I think it's a really exciting opportunity then for the athletes out there. Like, you really get to, these are these moments where you get to bring what you've been working on to the floor, and you get to do it on your own in some ways, which is an adventure in itself. So there's something really exciting about that. So I think that if I had a tip in there, would just be enjoy, the fun of it all. It's you're not going to get tryouts for the rest of your life. These are fun experiences, and they're meant to be fun, and you're there to play. So go play.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek. And then I'll finally turn to you, Akash. Any last tips, words?
Yeah, I guess it's similar to what Derek said, but I know it's like it can be frustrating, it can be exciting, but at the end of the day, volleyball's a game. We all played it at the beginning. We're all playing it now because it's fun. That's why we're here. We're not everyone, yes, everyone has different reasons, but if that's really at the age you are now, that's really what you're grasping for. And yes, you want to develop and yes, you want to improve, but if you're able to do that in an environment that makes you feel safe, you feel like you can grow and you can enjoy the process, then that's all you really can ask for in a good team and a good tryout. So focus on those components.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, this hour has gone very, very fast. I am now just going to flip to our last slide, which is really to conclude by saying we have some other resources for people. I just want to say a huge thank you to our ambassadors who are here tonight. I think you've provided a great deal of insight and context and support, I hope, for those people who are listening to the webinar. It's certainly helpful to share experiences and realize that you're not alone in going through all of this. I wanted to highlight a couple of the resources that we have. We actually have a managing performance anxiety webinar that is more on the technical side of things with Dr. Shauna Taylor. That is on our YouTube channel that you can find under Volleyball BC if you want to look that one up. We've also got some handouts on handling performance anxiety that have a few tips, which actually a lot of the tips that were discussed tonight are actually listed on that handout too. Just not as well explained or articulated. And you can find that on our Safe Sports page on volleyballbc.org. And then, as I mentioned before, we do have a new guide to club volleyball that has all your practical information. And we have another webinar tomorrow night if you want to ask all the different practical questions about what club volleyball is like, especially if you're new to the system. So there are some additional resources that we're happy to provide to you. And it really only remains for me to say, again, a huge thank you to the four of you for joining us tonight and for sharing your experiences and being part of this conversation. We really appreciate it. And I hope that everybody listening has taken some tips and tricks to help them get over the next few weeks as they're starting to find their places in the club system. So thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a good night.
Bye.